Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and today we have a very special LEGO concept artwork and prototypes video specifically surrounding the LEGO Batman movie, which came out in 2017. Now, around 2017, when the Batman movie came out, LEGO released a very detailed concept art book showcasing a lot of canceled designs and all the effort that went into creating the different minifigures, vehicles, characters, and settings for the LEGO Batman movie, including a ton of canceled artwork and designs that ultimately did not end up being in the film. And while the LEGO Batman movie is probably one of my favorite LEGO movies ever, heck, it's probably one of my favorite Batman movies ever, I still think there is a lot of really great stuff that ultimately did not actually make it to the final film, and so that's why we're here to take a look at every single page of the fascinating LEGO Batman movie concept art book, which I'll also add was only sold for a short time in specific regions, which is why I wanted to bring the content to all of you. And so without further ado, let's just jump right into the review and flip through of this book. The LEGO Batman movie has easily been one of my favorite LEGO movies and honestly one of my favorite Batman movies ever. But let's now take a look inside the making of the movie. This concept art book is packed full of concept models, designs, early sketches, storyboards, and yes, a ton of LEGO prototypes to take a look at. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff here in terms of what could have been. So let's just get started because there's so much we have to take a look at here. So obviously we start off, it's just kind of an introduction to the book here. And we have a bit of a content spread in terms of breakdown, which is what we're going to be following while going through the book, starting off with locations, then characters, then vehicles. So obviously vehicles is the section where we're going to see the most concept models for prototypes, whereas the characters will see some concept minifigs, and locations is mostly just concept artwork. Let's now just go ahead and jump right into this. We have a few forwards here from the directors of the movie, as well as a timeline of the production of the movie itself. So they're talking about how they first decided to actually make the LEGO Batman movie based off of the Batman character from the LEGO movie itself, hiring voice talent and whatnot, and eventually going through the R&D and modeling. And of course, all of this is just kind of a summary of what we're going to be getting into when we get into the actual meat of the book, so we can just kind of jump right through, going all the way up to the real world sets being the finalized version of the book. So now we have locations. So locations, you can see Gotham City right here. LEGO really went above and beyond when crafting Gotham City for the LEGO Batman movie, and you're going to see a lot of it here. So we're going to start off first with Wayne Manor. A lot of fantastic concept artwork can be seen for the location of the manor itself, being featured on this isolated island, with the final render being the brick-built Wayne Manor with Gotham City in the background. So if you look closely, everything in this photo is fully brick built, and that is honestly really impressive. Just look at the sheer amount of detail that's been packed into this render, from the road to the rocks to the manor itself. Everything is made out of LEGO bricks. That is honestly really insane to me. You can see some concept artwork here, mostly in black and white, which makes total sense for Batman. Here you can see some more color backgrounds, but really, this is just kind of the standard final artwork for the Wayne Manor as a solitary castle surrounded by a literal moat of water. Moving onwards, we have the interior of Wayne Manor. We have not gotten to the Batcave yet, but just taking a look at some of the stuff that you can see inside the manor itself, from the massive swimming pool to the large movie theater, which was seen in the movie, as well as just the different paintings of Batman and Alfred, as well as the parents, Thomas and Martha Wayne, on the back here. Just all sorts of really interesting, fun details which can be seen throughout the paintings here. Now, the inside is truly fantastic. Look at how gorgeous the interior of the manor is, with the beautiful chandelier and the massive table with so many seats, but only Batman sitting on the one seat there. Now, on the next page, we actually have a lot more different pictures of Batman. These are, of course, very funny and goofy because they're saying the mask hardly comes off, so no matter what he's doing, he has the Batman cowl on, horseback riding, playing tennis, he's playing some cricket and whatnot. Everything he's doing still has the Batman mask on. So that's a little bit funny to see here. All sorts of different paintings within the manor showcasing the Batman-style designs. And then we have the Jokerized Wayne Manor. So this is actually the version of Wayne Manor that was made into an official LEGO set, which was really cool to see as an actual LEGO set. It's basically taking the backdrop of Wayne Manor and making it Joker-fied. So you've got the big Joker sign, a very fantastical entrance to mimic a fun fair, and they even had a sketch artwork to transform it into a full-blown theme park with so many different roller coaster loops and whatnot going all sorts around the particular manor itself. Moving onwards, we have a look at the actual Batcave. So I really like this particular concept artwork showcasing the amount of different vehicles that can be seen here. A lot of these are recognizable as both Lego sets as well as being featured in the movie, from the Bat Space Shuttle to the Batwing there. Even the Bat Blimp I think made an appearance, but a lot of the other vehicles never actually were translated into actual Lego sets. If you look closely in the Batcave, they stated that you could see the history of Batman with the trophies and Easter eggs, and they stated that if you actually wanted to build the Batcave with Lego bricks, it would be 299 feet or 91 meters long, so absolutely massive in real life. Next up, you see even more concept artwork of the technology introduced for the Batcave, from the really cool bat-shaped logo screen here to a bit of the buttons being introduced here, plus a lot of the larger screens. They really tried to lean into the high-tech aspect of the Batcave when designing the look and feel of the designs. And of course, you have so many different bat suits. The Batman movie brought us a lot of different Batman outfits, but that barely scratched the surface of what was seen in the movie, where you can see so many different suits here, from one that's more of kind of almost like an Iron Man style outfit right here to a scuba suit. All sorts of different interesting outfits for Batman to wear were adorning the different concept artwork walls. And we'll take a closer look at all these when we get to the minifigures, because there were a ton of bat suits that never actually made it into the final film. Moving onwards, we have the garage. So the Batcave garage showcases all of the different land vehicles he uses, which of course not every single one made it as a final official set, but you can see here the different renders of vehicles. He has a very stylish red car as one of them. Of course, you have the Speedwagon, which was the main Batmobile being used, but pretty much every single Batmobile ever seen throughout cinematic and comic history was replicated in Lego form for this particular display. You can see the 1989 Batmobile there, and all sorts of different ones across the history of Lego Batman and just Batman in general, which is really cool to see as part of the actual movie. Moving onwards, you have the hangar. Now we have all of the flying vehicles, where they say that this is the hangar area, demonstrating how over the top the collection of vehicles are. And the design team, to quote, answered, "What would a Batcave be like if someone had literally billions and billions and billions of dollars at their disposal, and also an ego to match that amount of money?" So there is just an insane amount of vehicles. You can actually see the one from Batman v Superman right here. Of course, all of these are just concept designs and artwork, but of course, when we get to vehicles, we'll be taking a look at all of these in much greater detail. Moving onwards, we have Gotham City. Now look at this amazing concept artwork. This does not even feel like it's made out of Lego. If someone showed me a picture of this, I would legitimately believe it was a real city. So absolutely insane design artwork that went into Gotham City. Honestly, the Gotham City as depicted in the Lego Batman movie is one of my favorite Gotham cities ever depicted on screen, somewhat close to the actual The Batman movie, which just came out in 2022. I really love the aesthetic and vibe that the city has, and you can see a lot more of it in this fully brick-built render right here. As you can see, this is all brick built with single Lego pieces. So every single one of these is a Lego brick, right down to the plants being used in the road. Just such an incredible amount of work that went into creating the renders here. Over here we have some concept artwork where it showcases Gotham City after the villains were able to actually invade it and take over. We have some evil lava pouring down, a skeleton here, and all sorts of just different interesting things to see throughout the city itself. Moving onwards, we have some more renders of city scenes. Right here is the final render of the shoddy streets, which shows the rundown nature of the city. Really interesting seeing some of the cars being lit on fire and the very dark and moody lighting here, just befitting Gotham City in general. And of course, you have these massive statues which adorn the centerpieces of the streets, which just look really interesting to see. They specifically said Gotham City is a mix of 1970s Times Square as well as Piccadilly Circus, which I think absolutely makes sense, and has a bustling abundance of traffic and billboards, and at its center, a truly monumental statue, which is a parody to the giant statues seen in early Batman films. Moving onwards, we have an assortment and array of city dwellers, as well as just all sorts of different types of designs for different billboards being seen, and lots of references to Batman characters and DC characters, just all sorts of really cool things to see here. They have the Musk of the Phantasm instead of Mask of the Phantasm there as reference to one of the early Batman animated stuff. We have the Laszlo's Ham, so Professor Pig, of course, Black Canary's new album, even an old beat-up up poster to vote for Harvey Dent before he inevitably became Two-Face. This is even a reference to a real-world painting, which is really cool to see this as well. And of course, is it a bird? Is it a plane? Yep, it's a plane. Daily non-stop flights to Metropolis with Ferris Air. So all sorts of really fun details. And I honestly really like the amount of detailing that actually went into building some of the vehicles and the subway station. These are actual real Lego vehicles that actually were physically built for the models here, and they actually state that some of these were actually considered as official Lego sets. And man, I would have loved to get that 8 stud wide taxi. That is a really cool build, and I honestly kind of want to replicate it myself now. The subway car is also fantastic. Would love to see an updated subway car, and you even have different graffiti artwork which correspond to certain villains, such as the Riddler right there. So lots of really interesting things to see here, plus the whole variety of citizens on the bottom of the page here. Moving onwards, we have some more different aspects of the Wayne influence on Gotham City, such as some donations being made to specifically benefit certain Wayne funds. Man, would have really loved to see this limo as a Lego set. This was the lowrider limo for Bruce Wayne right here, which is really cool to see. And of course, we have the GCPD building as well. So the police force has a lot of different vehicles. We got the police car as an official Lego set in the Arkham Asylum set, but we never really got any of these other vehicles. So really interesting to see how much effort went into making different vehicles for the GCPD. And of course, the array of different vehicles parked outside of the massive police station. I also like the police personnel development being kind of used here. We'll take a look at these more when we get to characters, but you can see the different policemen being used for the GCPD building itself. And of course, this massive animation development for the Gotham City Police building truly standing out apart the rest of the city. Again, if you kind of took a look at this from a step back, even though this is an unfinished render, you can just see how impressive it is as a fully brick-built city. This is not just a concept artwork or kind of design for a city. Every single piece has been built by Lego pieces. You can see here, you can make out the individual Lego bricks, even in the massive statue here. So that is insane to me. Moving onwards, we have City Hall. So this is the massive City Hall for the Outdoors Gotham ice rink here. Just some other minifigures are showcased here as well, but you can really see the amount of design effort that went into developing something like this for the City Hall of Gotham City. And of course, the energy facility for a completely different environment here, showcasing the Gotham Energy Plant, which is honestly some bits and pieces of what we actually got in the official Lego sets. This was the biggest opening sequence, which they actually stated is normally someone else's third act, which was a big heist with a takeover of the city. That is how they started the movie, which was really interesting. Moving onwards, they said that this is really the scene that set the tone for what was to follow. So they have the massive cargo plane, the final render, which can be seen here, which was actually a shot from the movie, which is really, really beautiful. Look at just the amount of detailing that was introduced for the water, as well as the plane itself. Just so cool to see here with the massive brick build explosion. And moving onwards, we have the orphanage. So this was the orphanage where Batman finds Robin. You can see that he added a lot of Bat merch to the different characters, including the 1966 Batman TV series logo, which is really fun. And they actually had a lot of scenes that they actually developed inside the orphanage itself, which ultimately we didn't really even get to see. So this was really a lot of stuff that did not actually end up finally in the movie, although it definitely played a role in terms of the characters that appeared for that sequence. Moving onwards, we have Arkham Asylum. So Arkham Asylum here is the large jail used to house the prisoners, and they specifically state that it was established in the DC universe in 1974 and named after a town in H.P. Lovecraft's horror stories. So that is really, really fun. And they also stated that they specifically wanted to push the design to make it even more extreme. So you've got some views of the inside and outside for the gate and the interior, featuring a lot of room for the prisoners to interact with their surroundings, even a place where the prisoners can call visitors from the outside. And of course, you have this large dinner time concept art featuring all of the different villains, which is really funny to see here. And yes, even still, we have a lot more fully brick-built development for Arkham Asylum. Again, every single one of these has been built with actual Lego bricks, which is absolutely insane. And they even actually stated that at the backstory, it was initially built as an asylum at the turn of the last century, but as the villains became more and more nefarious, they had to increase the scope. So rather than expanding it outwards, they built an underground facility. So it just keeps on going deeper and deeper for more and more cells of villains, which you can see right here, an absolutely colossal space. And then we have the Fortress of Solitude. This was seen during the sequence where Batman visits Superman, and you can see some of the different designs for the characters here. We did eventually get most of these in actual movie outfits for the LEGO Batman movie collectible minifig series and sets, although unfortunately we never got Gleek. What's up with that? We got the Wonder Twins but no Gleek, unfortunately. Moving onwards from that, we have some more different Phantom Zone-like aspects, such as the watchful guards here, which you can actually see in a polybag that was featured in the movie itself, as well as the massive Joker mouth forming a portal into the Phantom Zone, which was a very strange space, a very blocky kind of different conceptual artwork being explored for the motion of the Phantom Zone, which all in all made for a very fascinating area for the movie itself. Over here you can see even more different detailings of the Phantom Zone, where it's focusing directly on Batman's internal plight as he's faced with the different reflections of the people in his life. But that brings us to characters. And characters, there was a lot of effort went in, because not only did we have Batman, but we had his entire rogues gallery, all the citizens, Batgirl, Robin, all sorts of different stuff. So of course we have to start off with Batman, and obviously the design for Batman was pretty much unchanged from the standard LEGO Batman outfit, which I think makes total sense. Sure, they warped the cowl a little bit just for the animation styles to actually make him have different expressions, as can be seen here, but ultimately the final version of Batman is pretty much just the regular LEGO Batman we've seen, plus the belt. So really, not a lot of concepts even had to go into this, because the look of Batman has already been decided and is a classic minifigure in its own right. Moving on though, they did try to come up with a lot of different other looks for Batman. You can see here they were playing around with actually making a cloth element for the robe that Batman wears here, as well as different swimsuits and whatnot that he could wear, all featured in the collectible minifigure series. And they also state that the utility belt piece, which of course was developed for the final element, was simply painted on as a concept, which ultimately helped design it as a final LEGO 3D element. And here we have many of the different Batsuits, again, not all of which we actually saw as final sets. We got the Tartan Batman as one of the actual models, Clown and Disco Batman. Let's see, what else do we get? We got the Whizbat, the Merbat, Scoobat, Showman Batman, Caveman. We did not get these. We got the Baturion, thankfully. This was a fantastic minifigure. We also got the Easter Batman. Did not get these, did not get this one. We got Excalibur Batman in LEGO Dimensions, actually, of all things, and the Glam Metal Batman. But ultimately, a lot of these other designs were not even used whatsoever. We never got a military leader Batman, which is a little bit of an odd choice. I can see why they didn't want to include that one. But I would have loved to see the Boo Batman, or even the SWAT or Krampus Batman, just all sorts of different fun designs. But I think the best designs we did end up getting as minifigures, which is very nice. Moving onwards, we have some even more outfits specifically for Batman's different tuxedo suits. We ultimately only ended up getting two of these, the Kiss Kiss Tuxedo Batman as well as the leopard printing suit, but a lot of these other designs would have been very fun to get as minifigures as well. And finally, we have inspirational images from all of the different cinematic images of Batman up to the LEGO Batman movie. So this is actually really interesting. Of course, you start off with Detective Comics from 1939, then Batman #9 from 1942, the 1943 Batman movie, then Batman the movie from 1966, and then we have the Dark Knight Returns from 1986, the comic itself, which is a very iconic image of Batman right there. Of course, we have the very first kind of theatrical Batman movie, or the first main one, the Tim Burton Batman movie from '89. Then we have Batman the Animated Series, another fantastic interpretation of Batman. Of course, right here we have Batman Begins, then Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, and finally, the Super Friends. Moving onwards, a lot of different concepts were developed for Bruce Wayne, specifically modeled after the actor's face, which is something I find to be really interesting. They specifically took shots of Will Arnett in the recording booth and tried to translate that directly to the facial expressions of Bruce Wayne, which I think is a really cool detail to include. Of course, they have a lot of different kind of designs and stylistic designs for them, and early art even explored a conceptual vintage style of Bruce, which kind of has an older kind of 1970s style of look, which was eventually not used for the final Bruce Wayne figure, but is still kind of retained in the sets, vehicles, and background characters. Over here we have some more modern designs, specifically with the tuxedo that we eventually got for the film, and the very stylized face that we got for the final figure. Moving onwards, we now have even more different designs for the development of the Bruce Wayne characters, specifically the gala that he attends right here, which has been brick built fantastically. And of course, this is the final render for Bruce Wayne being a natural in front of the cameras at Gotham City. Moving onwards, we now have Alfred. So Alfred was used for a variety of different designs. It seems that they were exploring different ages for Alfred, for different kind of shades of hair and balding patterns. And of course, they have the bat suit Alfreds as well, when he chooses to don the Adam West Batman outfit, as well as just the traditional bat suit combined with Alfred's standard design. Of course, the final design for Alfred, I think, is very much a good representation of the character. I think it was a great way that they eventually landed up on this particular version of the character itself. But of course, there's even more concept artwork of Alfred doing some cleaning chores around Wayne Manor to keep it fully kept up. Going on from him, we now have Barbara Gordon. So Barbara Gordon is another one of the major characters in the movie. We only eventually ended up getting a couple of these minifigures as actual physical models. We got this one, I believe, model like this, as well as the standard GCPD outfit, but a lot of these did not even get made into actual Lego minifigures. What's interesting is that they actually went through a whole different range of different faces for the figure itself, and even tried to introduce a cap piece that's blended together with the ponytail, which unfortunately I don't think we ever actually got this piece as an actual physical model. It would have been really cool to get that because it's a great dual molded element, but unfortunately that never was to be. Moving onwards, we have different lifestyles and looks for Barbara Gordon. This presumably was before the actress Rosario Dawson was cast, so they were kind of trying to do a more traditional Barbara Gordon with the red hair, which you can see right here, and of course a very different look for the vigilante persona for Barbara, which she was watching over the city while still working under the Gotham City Police Department. Moving onwards, we now have the different explorations of the Batgirl outfit. So a lot of these, it seems, were made early on in the process for these ones here, and then these ones were made a little bit later on. You can see we did get a lot of different designs for the conceptual artwork for Batgirl, upon eventually ending up with, I believe, these two actually being featured in the collectible minifig series, and then the final look for the outfit itself. Although it is pretty interesting to see the different types of outfits that she would have been given if she were to do a vigilante type thing on her own without actually pairing up with Batman. And moving on, we have her father, Jim Gordon, again going through multiple different iterations of design here. I really like the hairpiece they created for him, which was kind of a dual color cast, new style of hairpiece that's a little bit tussled. But I also like a lot of these older designs which feature a fully fabric coat. We actually talked about that in the Lego Ninjago movie concept art book flip through, which featured a coat that was made for minifigures that never actually was made as an official Lego piece, but it seems that they were also experimenting with it for this particular figure as well. Moving onwards, we have some more looks at Jim Gordon in particular, which I think is a good representation of the character itself. But with that, we can now move on to Dick Grayson before he became Robin. So here we have all sorts of different iterations of the Dick Grayson character. It seems that they considered giving him short legs for one iteration, but pretty much everything else had the long legs, probably to make it such that he could fight. If they had mid legs at the time the movie came out, I am sure that Robin would have featured mid legs, but as it is right now, he basically just has the standard regular minifigure legs. This design in particular, I think, is a really cute design for an outfit. It has kind of a coat that goes over the entire minifigure body and just a traditional hat on top of his head, but I like the design they also ended up with the very cartoonish glasses as well. Of course, we have a lot more designs for the Dick Grayson character in terms of storyboard art, kind of Dick Grayson living at the orphanage, which ultimately was not actually put in the final film. And then we have Robin. So the different outfits for Robin are really interesting because they really were trying to do all sorts of different things for Robin itself. I really do like the eventual blend they settled on with the dual molded legs and arms, but here's a lot of really interesting different characteristics. You can see the batsuit which inspired Robin's design, as well as all sorts of different types of Robin outfits that ultimately lended itself to the final version. You can also see the Nightwing persona here. This was the early version of Nightwing when he was trying out different superpower-like looks until eventually landing on this final version. And the Nightwing armor piece is still one of the coolest armor pieces we've seen from LEGO, and I'm very glad that that wasn't restricted to just Nightwing himself. With that though, we can now move on to the villains. So here we have the Joker, and man, these are pretty terrifying if I do say so myself. It seems that a lot of these cartoons for Joker were probably a little bit too scary to put on screen, which is why they ended up with a slightly more cartoonish look. But honestly, look at how terrifying all of these faces are in particular. I don't know if I necessarily would have wanted to see something like this or this on the big screen, or even this one. They're all pretty creepy, but very, very interesting to see these different iterations for the design of the Joker character before eventually landing up with the final version. And you can see even more different versions. Look at this one. This one doesn't even have eyes. He just has a wide grin with no eyes. That is very creepy right there. So all sorts of very freaky looking Joker designs. This one's probably the closest to the one we eventually got, with literally having the cartoony sharp teeth, but there's a lot of really interesting stuff here. I mean, imagine if we got this design for the Joker being almost like a Mexican or Spanish inspired design here for Day of the Dead. That is really interesting. And of course, just all sorts of wildly different concepts for the Joker himself. Moving onwards, we have even more looks for the Joker. They specifically wanted to emphasize the relationship between him and Batman, which was the core of the movie. And here you can see the different expressions that went into developing the Joker's many crazed facial expressions. Man, I really wish we got something like this as an actual minifigure. That's a really funny expression. Even something like this. I do wish that they actually put these as actual Lego minifigures. And that hair is honestly really interesting, and probably would have been even more interesting than the final look, which was a little bit more symmetrical for the Joker. Moving onwards, we now have Harley Quinn. So most of these other villains barely got any screen time at all in the Lego Batman movie whatsoever. Really, they were mostly just background characters, but that did not stop Lego from introducing a ton of concept artwork and designs to make these characters. From simple hand sketches, which were depicting Harley in a more cartoonish-like blend, as well as just experiments with different styles of outfits, you can see all sorts of different designs that ultimately lended itself to the final design. They actually stated that it was Matthew Ashton's, who's the vice principal of design at Lego, the favorite character to develop, so they have a lot of different striking designs for her, which can be seen right here, ranging from very realistic to more cartoonish. Some of these would probably have been a little bit too risque to put as actual Lego minifigures, but I appreciate the dedication that they went into making the different nurse outfits for Harley, as well as some skater-looking outfits as well, just all sorts of different designs being introduced for the very loud and wacky character that Harley is. Ultimately, these four were the final designs that they actually made as Lego minifigures. They specifically have the Tutu, Cannonball, Roller Derby, and Nurse, and they won out as the chosen styles in the movie as well as in Lego form. So ultimately, all of these other versions were discarded because they also do seem to have a very different visual graphic design style to them, particularly with these two and these two right here. Moving on, we have even more different sketches for Harley Quinn. They specifically state that they had to interpret her design and persona to fit into both a physical appearance and personality appropriate for minifigure existence. So they really were trying to figure out what is the best way to depict this with Lego. And with that, we have even more Harley Quinn concepts. So they really went all out with this particular character, including even the alter ego for the Doctor, eventually landing on this particular character, but they actually went in completely radically different designs as well, including one where she was actually a counselor to Batman, which would have been really, really funny for me. Moving onwards, we now have Catwoman. So it's very clear that a lot of these designs were actually inspired by some of the previous movie iterations of Catwoman, particularly the ones here like the Anne Hathaway version, or even some of the ones from the 66 series, before ultimately ending up with the purple outfit that we saw in the movie itself. I actually find it's really interesting how they initially developed the piece in pure black, which you can see right here. They developed multiple different versions of the Catwoman cowl in black before actually changing her color scheme to a plain purple, which absolutely is much more striking compared to some of the previous designs. You can even see some more concept artwork here of Catwoman perched atop a ledge. And then, of course, we get to the Riddler. So the Riddler is a character who has been kind of a lot more in the spotlight recently thanks to the Batman movie that just came out. But previously, you can see they were experimenting with very cartoonish looks for Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler himself. Really interesting how they actually really tried to stretch the graphic design for the facial expressions to a point where I feel like some of these don't really fit Lego too much. This is a very good design, although honestly the facial print, I probably would have preferred to see something closer to these smiling faces in the Lego sets itself, because these are a lot of different expressions that they came up with for just the one character. Moving onwards, we have the penguin, whereas some of these are completely downright creepy. Just look at the face on this one, or even this one. Honestly, even the face on this one. A lot of these penguin concepts are incredibly menacing to look at before they eventually decided on this final version for the penguin, who's still somewhat menacing, but still also very cartoonish. You'll notice that for the penguin, they specifically also developed the brand new top hat and the coat piece, which has been used a lot of times in different LEGO models, plus the umbrella, which is a really great piece to get as well, which thankfully has appeared in a ton of different LEGO sets since. From the penguin, we now have Poison Ivy. I am a big fan of the designs of Poison Ivy, but I also think the final design that ended up in the final movie is one of the best designs for Poison Ivy we've ever gotten as an actual LEGO minifigure, but you can really see the amount of work that went into each of the designs here, trying to come up with a different style and look and feel for the character itself. The hair sculpt is honestly probably the most impressive piece that I can say was originated from this figure, with very rose-like curls as well as an actual flower being placed on the end there. Some of these designs may have pushed a little bit the limit of what is appropriate to make as a LEGO minifigure, but I think the final one is a really great compromise between the two different looks and really serves to be a great representation of the character as a whole. Moving onwards, we have another kind of full-page spread of Poison Ivy. This is the final render of her making her way through the energy facility, taking over the power plant. Next up, we have Two-Face. Now, Two-Face is a really fun minifigure because they ultimately decided to make the minifigure a design that is making it look like it is literally melted plastic. So it's actually supposed to look like the hairpiece has been melted or damaged by fire, which is a really fun design to get. I mean, a lot of these are actually very similar to older LEGO movies. This design in particular looks just like how he looked like in one of the older films, as well as just different designs in general. They were really trying to experiment with what Two-Face could look like. I personally really find this design very funny, where it's literally a minifigure who has Sharpie scribbled on one side and the side of the hair is melted down, but ultimately they ended up on the burnt plastic type of thing, which I think works out very well, and you can even see his underwear underneath. Now, Two-Face went through a lot of different iterations, as you can see. They even used the classic Billy D. Williams Lando style of face here, which is really interesting, before landing on something that was a little bit more realistic for the LEGO minifigure design. Moving onwards, we have Scarecrow. So Scarecrow is yet another one of Batman's villains. You'll notice that they also went through very creepy iterations. Man, this would have been very interesting to see. LEGO has never printed on the ninja scarf wrap piece before, but that would have been fascinating to actually get printed. Although the ultimate design is fairly interesting, albeit a little bit plain for, at least in comparison to some of these other designs, it's still a really fun design to get as a minifigure, and I really do appreciate the printing even continuing alongside the legs here. Now, Scarecrow is a very cool minifigure villain design. They also have the pizza delivery outfit for him undercover, which we did actually get as a LEGO model, which was pretty funny. But all in all, I honestly think that something like this probably would have been even more interesting and menacing for the Scarecrow figure. They also stated that literally some of the initial artwork was a little too monstrous, so they simplified the sack face to make him less scary. So that's honestly pretty funny. They probably figured that these were a little bit too scary for kids, so they wanted to tone it down just a little bit. Moving onwards, we have the Scarecrow in group therapy or sharing circle at Arkham Asylum, which unfortunately was another scene that we never actually saw in the movie, but would have been pretty funny to actually get as part of one of the designs. And next up, we have Killer Croc. Now, Killer Croc is probably my favorite LEGO Big Fig ever. It's probably one of my favorite designs that ever came out of this movie because they're using the classic LEGO crocodile piece and making a massive Big Fig out of it. Now, that is such a fun and inspired design. Sure, they had some good concepts for Killer Croc with a regular style of face, but I'm so happy that for the LEGO Batman movie, they eventually landed up making him the standard LEGO crocodile, because that was a great choice, and I think that this is honestly probably one of the best Big Figs we've ever gotten, including neck articulation as well as 7 brand new elements. So this is an absolutely stunning design for Killer Croc. Moving on, we have Mr. Freeze. So Mr. Freeze was one of the most initial designs that they actually created because he was both a character and a mech in and of itself. So they really had to decide on the design and style for Mr. Freeze before making him into actual production. As you can see, not a lot of different designs concepts went into the iteration of the figure itself, but a lot went into developing the mech, which you can see the final version here. They were really experimenting with how small they can make a brick-built figure while still making it fully articulatable. And ultimately, I think the final version they ended up with is a pretty fun and cool design as well. Although it is a very, very fun concept to have him literally be wearing teddy bear slippers. Moving onwards, we have another full-page spread of Mr. Freeze. Now this looks very menacing, very cool how he has the eyes glowing there and the brick-built ice blast. Just a really cool design in general. And then we have Bane. So Bane right here was, of course, had to be done as a big fig. You can really see they have the Tom Hardy styled Bane right here as the head, which would have been pretty funny, but ultimately they ended up with the final one. And eventually they just did end up with the comic styled outfit, which is still good as well. Of course, a lot of these designs stayed very close to what we eventually got for the final product with the very large fur coat, which is kind of a callback to the Bane movie depictions, as well as a very early big fig, which you can see right here. This is kind of one of the early designs, which ultimately was transformed into this finalized model for LEGO. And finally, we have Clayface. So Clayface is one of the last villains we're taking a look at here, which ultimately ended up being fully brick built, which is really interesting to see. This is a very different style of Clayface, but they eventually landed up on the very goopy kind of pixelated style of clay for him versus one that was more of a rounded kind of wet clay aspect. It's just really interesting seeing the different textures that actually went into making Clayface an actual LEGO model. So a lot of details that goes into this. And of course, you can see here how they actually decided to portray Clayface's animation with literally just Lego pieces blobbed around with clay flying all over the place. And yeah, you can see some of these are actually physical Lego models. They were experimenting with slime to see exactly how Lego bricks would look like combined with slime itself. And finally, we have the rest of the rogues. So these are not some of the most well-known Batman rogues, but these are some of the other random ones. We did get a lot of these as final minifigures, but of course their final designs did change. For example, you can see that Killer Moth was changed quite a bit. We had a completely different design for Captain Boomerang and Calendar Man. We unfortunately did not get the calendar on his head, but for the most part, we got every single one of these characters in Lego form, which I think was really great that the Lego Batman movie actually decided to introduce. And then they stated that they loved the Man-Bat figure so much that they decided to forego any movie makeover and have him appear unchanged, which was a little bit odd, but I guess that fits. So all of these, of course, are early iterations of the different characters. They changed quite a bit. Phosphorus is pretty much the same. Crazy Quilt is similar, but without printing on the helmet. But some of the other ones underwent drastic changes, like the Calculator is completely different, especially with the headgear there. Of course, Kite Man and Polka Dot Man have different headgear and whatnot. So it's interesting seeing the different styles of designs they went with villains for the final movie. But with that, we have made our way over to vehicles, and there were many different vehicles used throughout the entire movie. So starting off, we have the Batmobiles. So you can see that they went through multiple different iterations, such as this really interesting glimpse at the Batmobile wheels fully turning outwards to make it roll sideways. You have a very souped up version here, which is pretty similar to the final version, and then some wild and out there concepts like the Batmobile here, which would have been very interesting to see as Lego models, but definitely non-traditional. Now you can see some of the concept development artwork for the different Batmobiles that were considered to be made into actual sets, which is also very interesting to see. Personally, I would have loved to be able to build this one or even this one as an actual Lego model. I just think all of these models are really fun cars to have in general, although I am a big fan of the final version they ended up with. Now, they actually introduced the brand new wing element for the Batman movie, which is this wing piece, which ultimately had a Technic piece added onto the end of it, but it's still interesting to see the model shaping development that went into creating the Batmobile look and feel. Moving onwards, we have even more different iterations, specifically now moving on to the Ultimate Batmobile. So this was the version of the Batmobile for the movie that was actually 4 different vehicles that combined into one for Batman, Alfred, Batgirl, and Robin. I think the final set is probably one of my favorite Batman sets ever. It's just such a cool design to have a Batmobile split up into 4, but as you can see, they actually went through a lot of different physical prototype iterations, like the versions that you can see right here, while still trying to figure out the vehicle phase design. But I think this was the best design they could have ended up with, and the highlights of the reds looks absolutely fantastic for the final model. Here you can see another design for the Ultimate Batmobile, which is more of a comedic design, which you can see starting off from a large hangar to a smaller jet to the car, which presumably transforms into the jet, which a motorcycle jumps out of, and finally a horse jumps out of the motorcycle for the final form of Batman's vehicles. This would have been very funny to see in the movie, but I'm not exactly sure how this would have worked as an actual Lego model. With that, though, we can move on to the Batwing. So the Batwing was the next LEGO model here. So you can see one of the final set designs right here and one of the prototypes here, which is very interesting to see. Now, the Batwing stayed mostly the same, I would say, throughout most of the development, for at least these sketches like this. Now, here's some crazy different silhouettes for the Batwing. Would have loved to see something like this. That would have been really cool, but I am ultimately very happy with what we eventually got. And even moving onwards to the Scuttler, we also have this kind of combination between a flying and crawling vehicle, which you can see one of them considered introducing a massive rack of flick-fired missiles to the top of the vehicle right here. So the bat-like Scuttler, they state, is part machine and part robotic beast, which is a very cool design to have for Batman. And here you can see that they have the final LEGO models. They specifically say that all of these are LEGO sets. But wait, this was never a LEGO set. I guess that this was supposed to be a LEGO set but was cancelled last minute, which is a shame. I honestly would be pretty curious to see what sort of villains they would have faced off against with this. Maybe it was meant to be planned for one of the later Batman waves, but eventually was just ultimately scrapped in favor of the rest of the models. So for the rest of them, all of these did actually appear as LEGO sets. They also experimented with completely different wacky vehicles and even some vintage Batmobiles. There's the red car I mentioned at the beginning. You have the massive tank-like Batman here, which is really cool. We actually saw a version of this in the Snyder Cut just last year, so cool to see this as an actual LEGO build, but ultimately these were the ones we got as final LEGO sets. This would have been very fun to see as well. Not sure how it would have worked as an actual LEGO piece though. And then we can now move on to the villain vehicles. So the Joker's vehicles started off as very, very different types of vehicles. You have a kitted out police car, a van right here, a helicopter, you even have one of the amusement park rides featuring all of the different other villains mounted on it, before they eventually decided on the notorious lowrider, which was this concept model right here. You can see a lot of chrome gold or metallic gold elements there, which is really interesting. Kind of wish we got those in the final set. But that's the concept model, and here is the final one. You have even more different designs for Joker trucks. This was actually supposed to be a LEGO set, or at least prototype for a LEGO set, which was a truck design, but ultimately they decided to just give Joker one style of vehicle. And you can even see his balloon pack right here, which we did get as an actual LEGO set. Moving onwards, we have Bane. So they experimented with a lot of different vehicles for Bane, such as making him be comically oversized for the vehicle he's in. Honestly, I find that really funny. I kind of wish that they went in some of these directions because I just think it would be really funny to see a massive Bane sticking out of a smaller tank. But eventually the vehicle that they went with was just kind of a standard tank-like vehicle. It wasn't too undersized for Bane. I think they could have pushed the comical aspect just a little bit more, and they even tried to experiment with different color schemes before landing on the final orange. Next up, we have the cat cycle. So first off, it looks like they actually experimented with a lot more interesting designs for the cat cycle. You can actually see the prototype models here. One of them was a mecha cat, one of them was a full-on car. You have a much sleeker motorcycle here, and then you have this one, which is the closest one to the final set. While the final set is a nice build, it's very, very simple. I probably honestly would have preferred something like this. I just really like how sleek this is, but if we had to pick something, the cat mech would also have been really fun. I kind of wish we got the cat mech as an actual LEGO build. Next up, we have the Riddler Racer. So what's interesting is that they started off by giving the Riddler a moped. Initially, this was the vehicle he was supposed to have in the sets until they ultimately decided the Riddler deserved a larger vehicle of his own. I still would have liked to see this as an actual add-on build as a set. I think it would have been pretty fun to see it as an add-on. But then, of course, you have all sorts of wacky different vehicles here. Not really sure this is like a double-decker bus with a wrecking ball at the back and a massive gift box in the back of it. This helicopter is really cool. Man, I wish that we got this question mark helicopter. That would have been such a fun design compared to the Riddler Racer, which honestly is kind of a bland design for the Riddler himself. I really wish we got that question mark helicopter. The final model is good, it just doesn't necessarily scream Riddler to me. Moving onwards, we have the Scarecopter. So Scarecrow at first actually almost got a massive blimp as a LEGO model. That would have been fascinating to see. I really wish we did get that. Although the final build is a very nice, compact mini helicopter, I just think it would have been really cool seeing a massive blimp. Of course, you have even crazier different flying contraptions for Scarecrow here, including a nightmarish horse right there, which is really interesting to see, something completely different than the actual jet that we ultimately ended up with. Next up, we have the Two-Face excavator. They started off with a truck similar to the Two-Face truck as seen in the original LEGO Batman series in 2006, until eventually deciding on this Falcone's repair truck, which you can see right here as the final LEGO model, which I think definitely suits Two-Face as a split vehicle quite well. But with that, we have reached the end. We are nearing the final models here for the vehicles. Just a couple more pages left. We have the Penguin's vehicles. He actually did get 2 different vehicles in the sets from the Arctic Roller here, which is one of my favorite villain vehicles ever. This is just such a cool design using expert use of the hot air balloon style pieces, as well as the Duckmobile, because hey, duck bricks. Of course, you have the duck concept, which was more of a duck monster truck flaming fire, which I also think would have been pretty funny, but I am happy with the eventual models that we did get. And of course, we have Killer Croc's tailgater as well, which ultimately was kind of a stylized Louisiana type truck, but they even experimented with giving Killer Croc a mecha as well as a yellow colored truck before deciding on this final version. And ooh, this is interesting. They initially had a killer limo, where it looks like a normal limo, but the front opens up to be like a crocodile mouth and revealing Killer Croc sitting at the front. That would have been a very fun concept in my opinion. And finally, we have Harley Quinn's cannon truck and Egghead's mech. So first of all, the cannon truck for Harley Quinn was eventually seemingly like it was iterated on, starting off as a wrecking ball machine versus a giant hammer piece before landing on this more stunt-like truck. Honestly, personally, I think it could have been a little more interesting than what it is. Egghead's mech was originally designed as a penguin mech, but the design team felt like it would be a better fit for Egghead's personality. So specifically, they saw the egg-shaped design and figured why not give it to Egghead. So as such, he is one of the only quote-unquote minor Batman villains that actually gets a vehicle of his own, and man is it a fun vehicle for him to get. I am a big fan of the Egghead mech LEGO set. I think it's a pretty underrated LEGO Batman movie set, and it just works out very, very well overall. But with that, we have summed up our look at the LEGO Batman movie making of book. I always love LEGO books like these. These are some of my favorite LEGO books ever, seeing some of the early sketches and concept art and storyboards and LEGO models, and I hope that you enjoyed flipping through this as much as I did making this video, because it is always a treat to pour through every detail of a book like this. Alright, and with that, we have summed up our look at the fascinating LEGO Batman movie concept art book. Let me know down in the comments below, did you like the designs? Are you happy with what we got? Or was there anything that you wish we got that was shown off in this book that never actually made it to the final film? I always love seeing it when LEGO does these art book type things for canceled concepts and rejected theories, so I really do wish that they would do more stuff like this, and let me know down in the comments below if there is a theme or line of sets that you want to see me delve into the concept artwork for, and if they exist, I will absolutely make a video for it. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Duck Break. Subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Thanks so much, and bye-bye for now.